May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Please be seated. All of our readings today tie together in one way. They're about the love of a parent for a child. Either God's love for all of us, his children, or David's love for his son Absalom, and the cost of that love. In all of them, there is sacrifice. In all of them, there is pain. There's not really much reward in the story of David and Absalom, but there is in the other two. That absolute love that David showed, where when his son rose up against him and led troops against him to take over his throne, when Absalom died, even then, David would have been happier for himself, not necessarily for Israel, but happier for himself had he died instead. Had he lost and Absalom still been alive. And we have God sending Jesus, his human form, to walk among us, to risk being human with all of the pains and joys that brings, and then to die so that we might live. The love of a parent that goes so far beyond any other love. And if these stories stopped there, it would already be an incredible message. But they don't stop there. In both our New Testament reading and our Gospel, it speaks of how we find our way to God. And the way that we find our way to God is not by what we do, but by how we respond to what God does. We cannot, of ourselves, find God. But God has already found us and is calling us and is saying, I'm here, pay attention, see what I am doing in your life and respond. And God is doing that just to those gathered here. God is doing that for every one of God's beloved, which means every single person. Whether they come to church, whether they go to synagogue, whether they go to temple, whether they stay home, whether they walk in the woods, God is calling us all. And we all have the opportunity to respond. And that's our true calling as Christians, is to respond to what God is doing in our lives, to respond to God's call in our communities, to join in with God, not to say, this is what I think God should do. But I think I see God doing this. How can I help? That's why we have this board at the back of the church. Over the next while, hopefully by the time I get back, though it might take longer, I would love to see that board covered with sticky notes. Those are back there too. And on those sticky notes should be written, the ministries that we see happening already here in this church and by these people outside of this church, and the needs we see that could be addressed by us and places we see God doing something. And at the end of gathering all of those, we'll make a list of them. And everybody will get a copy of that list, and everybody will get some stickers. And we will pray that God will speak to us through us as a group. And on those sheets of paper, we will all put the stickers on the ones that we think are the most important, that we feel the most called to respond to. And from that, we will have the start of building up an idea of what we are called to do in this community, what this church's mission is, what God's mission is through us. So anytime you think of something that we're doing, that you're doing, that you see that could be being done, write it down and put it on there. We don't need a whole bunch. It's not a voting system, so if you see it already there, you don't need to put it there again. Because it will only be on the list once, and the voting happens when we all have our number of stickers. But try and get as many different things on there as possible. And don't forget things like music. Don't forget things like preparing the altar, or cleaning the church, or setting up for events that we don't even have any part of, making the hall available to the community. These are all ministries. Another example of a ministry are the care home services that are provided out of this place, and the visitors that go to the care homes and to other places. Everything that we see God doing through us and apart from us, in the church and in the wider community, put it on board. And then we'll see what God is calling us to do. If it doesn't fill the board, we actually run into a problem. Because then when we go to vote, we're actually picking what we want to do, not what God is calling us to do. Because we've only put what individuals see as the important thing to start with. When we have a whole range of things, then it becomes much more difficult to decide and requires prayer, requires thought, requires more than looking at, well, I like this. And more, well, what good does this do? Who benefits? And where is this coming from? Is it coming from my personal preference, or is it coming from, I think God is doing something? So over the next month, think about it. Write things down. Don't write things directly on the whiteboard, because those are not whiteboard markers back there. Use the Post-its. And pray. And look for God. Because God is calling to each and every one of you, saying, I am here, I am doing things in your life. You deserve my love.